The gunshot that killed Zachary Owens' wife and daughter echoed in his mind every single day for 7 years, a relentless reminder that hope was a luxury men like him could not afford in this unforgiving world. He rode into Montrose, Colorado on a Tuesday afternoon in May of 1882, dust clinging to his weathered face and his heart as barren as the desert he had just crossed. The small town nestled in the valley looked like every other settlement he had drifted through since that terrible night when outlaws had torn his world apart, leaving him with nothing but a hollow chest and a pair of Colts he knew how to use too well. He had no plans to stay long, maybe a week to earn some money breaking horses for the local rancher. Then he would move on like he always did, because staying meant remembering, and remembering meant feeling, and feeling was something Zachary had sworn off the day he buried his family. The livery stable smelled of hay and horse sweat, familiar scents that offered no comfort as Zachary dismounted from his buckskin gelding. The stable hand, a kid no older than 16, took the reins with nervous hands, clearly intimidated by the tall stranger whose eyes seemed to look right through everything. Zachary paid him without speaking, grabbed his saddlebags, and headed toward the saloon he had spotted on the edge of town. The May sun beat down on his shoulders, hot but not unbearable, and somewhere in the distance, he heard the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer striking an anvil. Montrose was growing, he could tell by the fresh lumber on some of the buildings, and the railroad depot being constructed at the far end of Main Street. Progress, people called it, but Zachary had learned that progress meant nothing when you had nothing left to progress toward. The saloon was half empty, which suited him fine. He ordered whiskey and took a table in the corner where he could watch both doors, an old habit that had kept him alive more times than he cared to count. The bartender, a heavy-set man with a handlebar mustache, poured the drink without asking questions, another thing Zachary appreciated about frontier towns. People minded their business here, mostly because everyone had secrets they preferred to keep buried. He was halfway through his second glass when the doors swung open, and a woman walked in, and that was when everything Zachary thought he knew about himself began to crumble. She was not saloon girl pretty with painted lips and a practiced smile. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten, with auburn hair pinned up in a practical bun and green eyes that swept the room with intelligence and wariness. She wore a traveling dress covered in trail dust, and she carried a small carpet bag that looked like it contained everything she owned. The saloon went quiet, not because women never entered such establishments, but because this woman clearly did not belong there, and yet she walked to the bar with her spine straight and her chin up like she had every right in the world to be wherever she chose to be. "I am looking for work," she announced to the bartender, her voice clear and steady despite the dozen pairs of eyes fixed on her. "I can cook, clean, keep books, or teach. I am educated and I do not mind hard work." The bartender scratched his jaw, looking uncomfortable. "Miss, this ain't exactly the place to be looking for respectable employment. You might try the church or maybe the boarding house down the street." "I tried both already," she replied, and Zachary heard the exhaustion beneath her composure. "The church has no funds for a teacher, and the boarding house owner said she has no positions available. Someone at the general store suggested that saloons sometimes need cooks or cleaning help, so here I am." One of the men at the bar, a ranch hand Zachary had seen around town, leaned forward with a leer. "I got a position for you, sweetheart. Real comfortable work if you are friendly enough." The woman's face flushed, but before she could respond, Zachary found himself standing, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. The words came out before he could think better of them. The lady is with me. Any man who suggests otherwise can step outside and we will discuss it proper." Every eye in the saloon turned to him. The ranch hand sized him up, noted the twin colts worn low on Zachary's hips, and apparently decided his pride was not worth dying over. He raised his hands in mock surrender and turned back to his drink. The woman, however, walked straight over to Zachary's table, and up close he could see the desperation warring with dignity in her expression. "I do not need a protector," she said quietly but not unkindly. "I can fight my own battles." "I am sure you can," Zachary replied, sitting back down and gesturing for her to take the chair across from him. "But this town is full of men who will not respect that. You look like you have been traveling hard. When did you last eat?" She hesitated, pride and hunger clearly battling inside her, and hunger won. "Yesterday morning." Zachary caught the bartender's eye and held up 2 fingers. "Bring whatever food you have got and coffee." He looked back at the woman. "Sit, eat. Then you can tell me why an educated woman is wandering alone through Colorado looking for work in saloons." She sat, and as she did, Zachary noticed the slight tremor in her hands, the way her shoulders sagged just a fraction when she thought no one was watching. The bartender brought over 2 plates of beans and salt pork with hard biscuits, nothing fancy but hot and filling. The woman ate with careful, deliberate bites, trying not to appear too desperate, but Zachary could see she was famished. He ate his own meal in silence, giving her space and time, something he wished someone had given him 7 years ago when his world fell apart. "My name is Katherine Bryant," she finally said, setting down her fork and meeting his eyes directly. "I came from Illinois after my father died 3 months ago. He was a doctor, and he left nothing but debts. Creditors took everything, including the house I grew up in. I had an aunt who lived in Denver, so I used the last of my money to travel west, only to discover when I arrived that she had passed away 2 years ago, and no one had thought to inform us. I have been working my way from town to town since then, taking whatever jobs I can find, but the money runs out faster than I can earn it." "Zachary Owens," he replied, because it seemed only fair to offer his name in return. "I am a drifter. I go where the work is, stay as long as I need to, then move on. I have no family, no home, nothing to tie me down." "That sounds lonely," Katherine said, and there was no pity in her voice, just observation. "It is," Zachary admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. "But lonely is safer than the alternative." Katherine studied him for a long moment, and he had the unsettling feeling that she could see straight through the walls he had spent 7 years building. "What happened to make you believe that?" He should have shut down the conversation right there, should have finished his meal and walked away like he had done 100 times before when people got too curious. Instead, he heard himself saying, "I had a wife and a daughter. Outlaws killed them during a robbery 7 years ago. I was not there to protect them. I have been moving ever since." The sympathy in Katherine's eyes was genuine, not the shallow pity he had learned to despise. "I am sorry, that kind of loss leaves scars that never fully heal." "No," he agreed, "they do not." They finished their meals in comfortable silence, and when the bartender came to clear the plates, Zachary paid for both without comment. Katherine started to protest, but he waved her off. "You need to save what little money you have. Consider it payment for decent conversation." "I still need work," Katherine said, a hint of desperation creeping back into her voice. "I cannot survive on charity and my funds are nearly gone. If I do not find something soon, I will have to make choices I would rather not make." Zachary thought for a moment, then made a decision that went against every instinct he had developed over the past 7 years. "The rancher I am working for, Thomas Garrison, mentioned he needed someone to help his wife with the household. She has been poorly lately, and they have 3 young children. It is not glamorous work, but it would provide room and board plus wages. I can introduce you if you are interested." Catherine's face lit up with hope so bright it almost hurt to look at. "Would you really do that?" "You do not even know me. You need help, and I am in a position to offer it," Zachary said simply. "We can ride out to the Garrison Ranch tomorrow morning if you have somewhere to stay tonight." "There is a boarding house that rents rooms by the night," Katherine replied. "I have enough for one more evening. Meet me at the livery at dawn," Zachary said, standing and placing his hat back on his head. "The ranch is about an hour's ride north of town. You have a horse?" Katherine shook her head, looking embarrassed. "I sold her in the last town to pay for stage fare to Montrose." "You can ride double with me," Zachary offered, then immediately regretted it when he realized how close that would put them. But the words were out, and Katherine was nodding gratefully, and there was no taking it back now. That night, lying on a lumpy mattress in a room above the saloon, Zachary stared at the ceiling and wondered what the hell he was doing. For 7 years, he had kept himself apart from people, never staying long enough to form connections, never allowing himself to care about anyone or anything. Now he had just involved himself in a stranger's problems, and worse, he found himself actually hoping that Thomas Garrison would hire her, that Katherine would find a place in Montrose, that maybe he would see her again after tomorrow. Hope. That treacherous, dangerous feeling he had sworn never to let back into his life. He turned onto his side and closed his eyes, telling himself it was just common human decency, nothing more. But as he drifted off to sleep, it was Katherine's green eyes he saw, and the way her face had brightened when he offered to help. Dawn came cold and clear, with the sun painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Zachary saddled his horse and was checking the cinch when Katherine appeared, wearing the same traveling dress but with her hair freshly braided. She looked nervous but determined, and when she smiled at him in greeting, something in Zachary's chest that had been frozen for 7 years cracked just a little. "Thank you for this," Katherine said as Zachary helped her up behind his saddle. "I know you did not have to go out of your way." "It is not far," Zachary replied gruffly, uncomfortable with her gratitude. He swung up into the saddle in front of her, acutely aware of her hands resting lightly on his waist for balance. The buckskin gelding, sensing the extra weight, tossed his head but settled quickly under Zachary's firm hand. They rode north out of Montrose as the sun climbed higher, warming the morning air. The landscape was beautiful in its harsh way, with rocky mesas rising in the distance, and the Uncompahgre River winding through the valley like a silver ribbon. Katherine was quiet for the first few miles, but then she started asking questions about the area, about the ranch, about his work, and Zachary found himself answering more fully than he intended. There was something about her voice, her genuine curiosity, that made conversation feel natural instead of forced. "How long have you been working for Mr. Garrison?" Katherine asked as they crossed a wooden bridge over a creek. "Just a week," Zachary replied. "I heard he needed someone to break some wild horses he had purchased. The work is good, pays decent. I will probably stay another 2 weeks, maybe 3. "And then you will move on to the next town," Katherine said, not quite a question. "That is how I live," Zachary confirmed. "Does it not get exhausting, never having a place to call home?" Zachary was quiet for a long moment. "Home stopped meaning anything to me 7 years ago. Now it is just a word for something I used to have." Katherine's hands tightened slightly on his waist, a gesture of understanding or comfort. He was not sure which. "My father used to say that home is not a place, it is the people who matter to you. After he died, our house felt empty even before the creditors came." I understand what you mean about it being just a word. They crested a low hill, and the garrison ranch spread out before them, a well-maintained spread with a sturdy ranch house, a large barn, several corrals and bunkhouses for the hands. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Zachary could see a few men working with horses in one of the corrals. It was a prosperous operation, the kind of place that represented everything Zachary had once wanted for himself before life taught him that wanting anything was a fool's game. Thomas Garrison was a weathered man in his mid-40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He came out of the barn when he saw them approaching, wiping his hands on his pants. "Owens, did not expect to see you until later. Who is your companion?" Zachary helped Katherine dismount, then swung down himself. "This is Miss Katherine Bryant. She is looking for work, and I recalled you mentioning your wife needed help with the household. Miss Bryant is educated, capable, and willing to work hard." Garrison's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he turned to Katherine with a respectful nod. "Is that so, miss? What kind of work have you done before?" Katherine straightened her shoulders. "I helped my father run his medical practice for 5 years, managing his books, corresponding with patients, and keeping the office organized. I can read, write, and do mathematics. I am also trained in housekeeping, cooking, and I have experience with children. I am not afraid of hard work, Mr. Garrison, and I give you my word that if you hire me, you will not regret it." Something in her directness seemed to appeal to Garrison. "My wife, Sarah, has been feeling poorly since our youngest was born 8 months ago. The doctor says she needs rest, but with 3 little ones and a ranch to help run, rest is hard to come by. We have been managing with help from some of the ranch wives, but it is not a permanent solution. The position would include room and board in the main house, plus $30 a month. Hours would be long and the children can be a handful. Still interested?" "Very much so," Katherine said without hesitation. "When would you need me to start?" "How about right now?" Garrison said with a slight smile. "Let me introduce you to Sarah and she can show you what needs doing." Katherine glanced at Zachary, her eyes bright with gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she mouthed silently, and he nodded in acknowledgement, trying to ignore the warmth that spread through him at her happiness. Garrison led Katherine toward the house, leaving Zachary to tend to his horse. As he unsaddled the buckskin, one of the ranch hands, a young man named Peter, wandered over. "That is a pretty woman you brought around, Owens. She your sweetheart?" "No," Zachary said shortly. "Just someone who needed help finding work." "Shame," Peter said with a grin. "A man could do worse than a woman like that. Smart, pretty, and she looks at you like you hung the moon." "She does not," Zachary protested, but Peter just laughed and walked away, leaving Zachary unsettled and confused. He spent the rest of the morning working with a particularly stubborn bay mare, trying to put Katherine Bryant out of his mind and failing miserably. Every time he thought about riding on to the next town in a few weeks, the prospect felt less appealing than it had yesterday. That scared him more than he wanted to admit. Over the following days, Zachary found himself making excuses to be near the main house more often than was strictly necessary. He would volunteer to fix a loose board on the porch, or deliver a message to Garrison when the man could easily be found in the barn. Each time he caught glimpses of Katherine, usually surrounded by children or carrying baskets of laundry, always busy but somehow always finding a moment to smile at him. Those smiles began to mean more than they should. A week after Katherine started working at the ranch, Zachary was finishing up with the horses late one evening when she found him in the barn. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and orange, and Katherine's hair seemed to glow in the fading light. She carried a basket covered with a checkered cloth. Mrs. Garrison said you missed supper because you were working late, Katherine explained, setting the basket on a hay bale. She sent me with food. There is fried chicken, biscuits, and apple pie. That was thoughtful, Zachary said, wiping the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Tell her I appreciate it. I will, Katherine said, but she made no move to leave. Instead, she wandered over to the stall where the bay mare stood, now much calmer than she had been a week ago. She is beautiful. Mrs. Garrison told me you have a gift with difficult horses. I just have patience, Zachary replied, joining Katherine at the stall. Most horses that seem mean or crazy are just scared. You have to show them that you are not going to hurt them, that they can trust you. Takes time, but it works. Katherine turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression that made his breath catch. I think people are like that too. Sometimes we build walls to protect ourselves from being hurt again, and it takes someone patient to show us it is safe to trust. Zachary knew she was not just talking about horses or people in general. She was talking about him, about the walls he wore like armor. He should have deflected, changed the subject, or made an excuse to leave. Instead, he found himself saying, "Is that what you are doing? Waiting patiently for me to trust you?" Maybe, Katherine admitted softly. Or maybe I am just hoping you will let yourself be happy again, even if it is only for a little while. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Zachary wanted to tell her it was impossible, that happiness was not something men like him got to have, that she was wasting her time hoping for anything from him. But standing there in the golden evening light with Katherine looking at him like he was worth hoping for, the words would not come. Instead, he reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers barely brushing her cheek. "You should not hope for things from me," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "I am not staying. I never stay." "I know," Katherine replied, but she did not step away from his touch. "But maybe that is all right. Maybe we do not have to plan forever. Maybe we can just have now." It was the permission Zachary did not know he needed. He pulled Katherine close, wrapping his arms around her and holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world that never stopped spinning. She melted against him, her head resting on his chest, and for the first time in 7 years, the terrible emptiness inside him felt a little less vast. They stood like that until the sun finished setting and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Finally, Katherine pulled back just enough to look up at him. "Eat your supper before it gets cold. Mrs. Garrison will ask if you like the pie. Will you stay while I eat?" Zachary asked, the words feeling vulnerable and exposed. "I was hoping you would ask," Katherine said with a smile that made his heart ache in the best possible way. They sat on hay bales while Zachary ate, talking about everything and nothing. Katherine told him about growing up in Illinois, about helping her father with his patients, about her mother who had died when Katherine was 12. Zachary found himself sharing memories he had locked away, stories about his daughter's laugh and his wife's terrible singing voice, and for once, the memories did not come with crushing pain. They were still bittersweet, but Katherine's presence somehow made them bearable. "Thank you for telling me about them," Katherine said when he finished. "They sound like they were wonderful people." "They were," Zachary agreed. "For a long time I could not talk about them without feeling like I was drowning, but tonight with you it feels different. Like maybe I can remember them without it destroying me." "They would want you to live, Zachary," Katherine said gently. "Not just survive, but actually live. Be happy. Love again." "I do not know if I remember how," he admitted. Katherine reached over and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Then maybe we can figure it out together." From that night forward, something fundamental shifted between them. Zachary stopped pretending he was not looking for excuses to see Katherine. and Katherine stopped pretending she did not light up every time he appeared. The other ranch hands noticed, of course, and there was good-natured teasing, but Zachary found he did not mind. Thomas and Sarah Garrison noticed too, and Sarah in particular seemed delighted by the development. "That Katherine is good for you," Sarah said one afternoon when she cornered Zachary near the barn. She was a small, warm woman who reminded Zachary painfully of his late wife in some ways, but the pain was gentler now. "I have seen you smile more in the past 2 weeks than in the entire week before she arrived." "She is special," Zachary admitted, uncomfortable but honest. "She is," Sarah agreed. "And she looks at you like you are her whole world. Whatever is growing between you two, do not run from it out of fear. Fear is no way to live, Zachary." Her words stayed with him as May turned into June and the days grew longer and warmer. Zachary knew he should be thinking about moving on, about the next town and the next job. Instead, he found himself thinking about how Katherine's eyes crinkled when she laughed, about the way she hummed while she worked, about the conversations they shared in the evenings when the day's work was done. He was falling in love with her, had probably started falling that first day in the saloon, and the realization terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. One Sunday, Thomas gave everyone the day off, and Zachary asked Katherine if she would like to go for a ride. She agreed eagerly, and they packed a picnic lunch and rode out to a secluded spot along the Uncompahgre River that Zachary had discovered during his first week at the ranch. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and cottonwood trees provided shade from the June heat. It was peaceful and private, the perfect place for the conversation Zachary knew they needed to have. They spread a blanket on the grass and ate the lunch Katherine had prepared while watching the river flow past. The conversation was easy and comfortable, the way it always was between them now, but underneath, Zachary could feel the weight of unspoken feelings building. Finally, after they finished eating and were just lying on the blanket watching clouds drift by, Katherine broke the silence. "You have been here over a month now," she said quietly. "I know you said you never stay anywhere long. Are you thinking about leaving soon?" Zachary turned his head to look at her. She was staring up at the sky, her expression carefully neutral, but he could see the tension in her jaw. "I have been thinking about it," he admitted, "but not the way I usually do." "What do you mean?" He sat up, needing to see her face for this. "Usually when I have been somewhere a few weeks, I start getting restless. I start thinking about the next town, the next job. But this time, Katherine, when I think about leaving, all I feel is wrong, like I would be walking away from something important." Katherine sat up too, hope and fear warring in her expression. "What are you saying, Zachary?" "I am saying that 7 years ago, I stopped believing in the future. I stopped believing in happiness or love or any of those things people need to truly live. But then you walked into that saloon, all fierce and frightened and brave, and something in me woke up. These past weeks with you, I have felt more alive than I have in years. You make me want to hope again, Katherine, and that terrifies me." Tears shimmered in Katherine's eyes. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because hope means having something to lose," Zachary said roughly. "When I lost my wife and daughter, it nearly destroyed me. I am not sure I could survive that kind of pain again." Katherine reached out and cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Life does not come with guarantees, Zachary. We could both die tomorrow, or we could live 50 more years. The only guarantee is that if you run away from us, you will definitely lose what we could have together. Is that really less frightening than taking a chance on being happy?" She was right, of course. Zachary had spent 7 years running from the possibility of loss, and in doing so, he had guaranteed his own loneliness. Looking into Katherine's green eyes, Feeling her hands warm against his skin, he made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff and spreading wings at the same time. "I love you," he said, the words raw and honest. "I did not want to, and I fought against it, but Katherine, I love you. I do not want to leave Montrose. I do not want to leave you. I want to stay and build something if you will have me." The tears spilled over then, tracking down Katherine's cheeks, but she was smiling so brightly it was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. "I love you too, Zachary Owens. I think I have loved you since that first day when you stood up for me in the saloon. Yes, I will have you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to everything." He kissed her then, pouring 7 years of loneliness and fear and grief into the kiss, and finding that she met him with equal passion and understanding. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zachary felt something he had not felt since that terrible night 7 years ago: peace. Not the absence of pain, because the scars would always be there, but the presence of something stronger than the pain. Hope, love, a future. "We should probably talk about practical things," Katherine said eventually, still tucked against his side. "Like where we will live and how we will support ourselves." Zachary had already been thinking about this. "Thomas mentioned last week that he is looking for a permanent foreman. His current one is retiring at the end of summer. The job comes with a small house on the property and a good salary. If he offers it to me, would you be willing to stay on at the ranch?" "I would be willing to live anywhere as long as it is with you," Katherine replied. "But yes, I like it here. Sarah has become a good friend, and the children are sweet. It feels like a place we could build a real life." Over the following weeks, that is exactly what they began to do. Zachary approached Thomas about the foreman position and was offered the job on the spot. Thomas admitted he had been hoping Zachary would want to stay permanently, as he had proven himself to be reliable and skilled. The small house on the property needed some work, but it had good bones and enough space for a family someday. That thought, which would have sent Zachary running a few months ago, now filled him with cautious excitement. Katherine continued working for the Garrisons, but she and Zachary spent every free moment together, planning their future and slowly fixing up the house. The other ranch hands helped with the heavier repairs, and Sarah provided furniture and household goods she no longer needed. By late July, the house was livable and cozy, a real home for the first time in either of their lives in a long while. On a warm evening in early August, Zachary asked Katherine to marry him properly. He did not have a fancy ring or an elaborate plan, just the two of them sitting on the porch of their almost finished house, watching the sun set over the mesas. He took her hand in his and said the words that mattered. "Katherine Bryant, you brought light back into my life when I thought I would live in darkness forever. You taught me that it is possible to survive terrible loss and still find joy again. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me?" Katherine's answer was immediate and joyful. Yes, Zachary Owens, 1,000 times yes. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Montrose. Thomas and Sarah stood up with them, and half the town turned out to celebrate. It was nothing like Zachary's first wedding, which had been a big affair with all the trappings, but it was perfect in its own way. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed his bride and felt the final pieces of his broken heart knit back together, not erasing what he had lost, but making room for something new and equally precious. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Zachary still had nightmares sometimes, waking in a cold sweat with the sound of gunshots echoing in his mind. But Katherine was always there, holding him and reminding him that he was safe, that she was real, that their life together was real. Slowly, The nightmares became less frequent, and the good days far outnumbered the hard ones. Katherine thrived in her role helping Sarah while also making their house a true home. She planted a garden that produced vegetables for their table and flowers that brightened every room. She befriended the other ranch wives and became a valued member of the community. Watching her bloom brought Zachary a deep satisfaction that he had never expected to feel again. In the spring of 1884, Katherine told Zachary she was expecting a baby. The news filled him with a complex mixture of joy and terror. He was going to be a father again, something he had never imagined would happen after losing his daughter. Katherine understood his mixed feelings and gave him space to work through them, but she also reminded him daily that their child was a blessing, not a replacement for what he had lost, but a new chapter in their story. Their son was born in October of 1884, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him William Thomas, after Zachary's father and their good friend and employer. Holding his son for the first time, Zachary was overwhelmed by love and fear in equal measure, but Katherine's hand in his steadied him, reminded him that he did not have to face parenthood alone this time. Watching Katherine with their son brought Zachary a joy he had thought lost forever. She was a natural mother, patient and loving, singing lullabies and telling stories. As William grew from infant to toddler, Zachary found himself engaging with fatherhood in ways he had been too busy to do the first time around. He was present now, truly present, and he cherished every moment, even the difficult ones. 2 years later, Katherine gave birth to a daughter they named Emma Rose. She had her mother's auburn hair and a stubborn streak a mile wide. With 2 children, life at the ranch house was chaotic and exhausting and more wonderful than Zachary had dared to hope. He would sometimes stop in the middle of a workday and just marvel at the fact that this was his life now, that he had been given this second chance at happiness. Thomas Garrison became like a brother to Zachary, and their families grew close. Sunday dinners were often shared affairs, with children running wild while the adults talked and laughed. Sarah's health improved steadily, and she credited Katherine's help during those early difficult months as being instrumental in her recovery. The friendship between the 2 women deepened into something like sisterhood. The ranch prospered under Zachary's management. He had a gift for understanding both animals and people, and he built a crew of hands who were loyal and hardworking. Thomas gave him increasing responsibility, and they became true partners in running the operation. Zachary's reputation as a fair but firm foreman spread, and the Garrison Ranch became known as a good place to work. As the years passed, Zachary found that the memories of his first family, while still bittersweet, no longer haunted him the way they once had. He could think of his wife and daughter with love and sadness, but without the crushing guilt that had driven him to wander for 7 years. Katherine had helped him understand that surviving when they did not was not betrayal, and that honoring their memory meant living fully, not punishing himself with loneliness. In 1888, when William was 4 and Emma was 2, Katherine told Zachary she wanted to do something to honor his past while also celebrating their present. She suggested they plant a garden on a sunny corner of their property, with 2 rose bushes for his first wife and daughter, surrounded by flowers that would bloom every year. Zachary was moved by the gesture, and they created the memorial together, with William and Emma helping to dig holes and water plants, too young to fully understand but part of the healing nonetheless. Standing in that garden on a spring morning with Katherine beside him and their children playing nearby, Zachary finally made peace with the past. He would always carry the scars of loss, but they no longer defined him. He was not just the lonely cowboy who had lost everything. He was a husband, a father, a foreman, a friend. He was a man who had learned that hope was not foolish but necessary, that love was worth the risk of loss, that life could surprise you with second chances when you least expected them. By 1890, Montrose had grown significantly, with the railroad bringing new people and opportunities. Zachary and Katherine watched the town evolve while their own family remained the center of their world. William showed signs of inheriting his father's way with horses, while Emma demonstrated her mother's sharp mind and love of books. They talked sometimes about having more children, but they also felt complete as they were, grateful for what they had without needing more to feel fulfilled. On their 8th wedding anniversary, Zachary and Katherine took a rare evening alone, leaving the children with Sarah and Thomas. They rode out to the spot by the river where Zachary had first told Katherine he loved her. The cottonwoods were bigger now, the river flowed on as it always had, but they were different people than they had been that day. "Do you ever regret it?" Zachary asked as they sat on a blanket watching the sunset. "Choosing this life with me? You could have kept moving, found your way to a city, maybe taught school or married someone with more to offer." Katherine turned to him with exasperation and love in equal measure. "Zachary Owens, after 8 years of marriage, you should know better than to ask such foolish questions. You are my home. You and William and Emma. Everything I ever wanted was waiting for me in that saloon in Montrose the day I walked in desperate and frightened. You are my second chance just as much as I am yours." "I love you," Zachary said, the words still carrying the weight of wonder even after all these years. "I will never stop being grateful that you walked through those doors and gave me a reason to hope again." "I love you too," Katherine replied, kissing him softly. "And I will never stop being grateful that you saw me, really saw me, when I needed someone to believe I was worth helping." They stayed by the river until the stars came out, talking about their plans for the future. Thomas was considering selling them a portion of the ranch land so they could start building their own operation. William would start school next year, and Emma was already begging to go with him. Life was good, filled with the ordinary challenges and joys that made up a well-lived existence. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and growth. In 1893, Thomas and Sarah decided to retire to Denver to be near their eldest daughter, and they sold the ranch to Zachary and Katherine for a price far below market value, calling it a gift to family. Zachary protested, but Thomas insisted, saying that Zachary had been more than an employee. He had been the son Thomas never had, and he wanted to know the land he loved would be in good hands. Owning the ranch outright was both thrilling and terrifying. Zachary was in his early 40s now, with silver starting to thread through his dark hair, but he felt stronger and more capable than he ever had. Katherine, at 32, was the backbone of their operation, managing the books and handling the business side while Zachary ran the day-to-day ranch work. They made a formidable team, and the ranch prospered under their ownership. William, at 9, was already helping with the horses, displaying a natural talent that made his father proud. Emma, at 7, was a voracious reader who had announced she wanted to be a teacher someday. Zachary and Katherine encouraged both children to pursue their interests, while also teaching them the value of hard work and responsibility. In 1895, Katherine surprised Zachary with the news that she was expecting again. At 34, it was unexpected but welcome. Their third child, a son they named Samuel James, was born that winter. William and Emma adored their baby brother, fighting over who got to hold him and help care for him. Watching his older children with the baby, Zachary marveled at the life he had built, at how far he had come from the broken man who had ridden into Montrose 13 years earlier. The turn of the century found the Owens family thriving. The ranch was successful, the children were healthy and happy, and Zachary and Katherine's love had only deepened with time. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, market fluctuations and sick cattle, but they had done it together, and each challenge overcome made them stronger. On a crisp autumn evening in 1900, Zachary sat on the porch of the ranch house he had built and expanded over the years, watching his 3 children play in the yard while Katherine sat beside him shelling peas for dinner. William, now 16, was teaching 10-year-old Samuel how to rope a fence post, while 13-year-old Emma sat under a tree reading a book, occasionally looking up to offer advice or criticism to her brothers. "What are you thinking about?" Katherine asked, noticing the contemplative expression on her husband's face. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Zachary replied honestly. "There was a time when I thought my life was over, that I had nothing left to live for. I spent 7 years just going through the motions, surviving but not living. And then you walked into that saloon and everything changed." Katherine set down her bowl and took his hand. "We changed each other. You gave me a home and a family when I had nothing. You taught me that it is possible to build something beautiful from the rubble of loss. Do you remember what you said to me that first night when I told you I was lonely?" Zachary asked. "You said lonely is no way to live. You were right. I was not living at all until I met you. And now?" Katherine prompted, smiling because she knew the answer. "Now I am more alive than I ever thought possible," Zachary said, pulling her close and kissing her temple. "You gave me back my future, Katherine. You made me believe in hope again." As the sun set over the Colorado mesas, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Zachary Owens looked at his wife, his children, and the ranch they had built together, and he felt a profound sense of peace. The scars of his past would always be part of him, but they no longer defined him. He was not the lonely cowboy who had lost everything. He was a man who had been given a second chance and had grabbed it with both hands. He was a husband who loved fiercely, a father who was present and engaged, a rancher who had built something lasting. He was proof that hope, no matter how long buried, could bloom again when tended with love. The lonely cowboy had not hoped in years, but she had arrived and he had started hoping for a future again. That hope had grown into a life beyond anything he could have imagined, a life filled with love and family and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. And every day, when he woke beside Katherine and heard his children's voices echoing through the house they had made a home, Zachary gave thanks for the day he decided to help a desperate woman in a saloon, not knowing that in saving her, he would save himself. As darkness fell and Katherine called the children in for supper, Zachary took one last look at the land stretching out before him, land that was his, that he would pass down to his children someday. The Wild West was changing, becoming more civilized with each passing year, but here on the ranch, surrounded by family and the work he loved, Zachary had found something that transcended time and place. He had found home, not as a location but as Katherine had once said, as the people who mattered. And he had learned that hope, once thought dead and buried, could resurrect itself in the most unexpected ways, bringing with it possibilities more beautiful than any he had dared to dream. The future he had stopped believing in had arrived, and it was more than enough. It was everything.